We are a gentle voice that expresses itself powerfully through hearts consecrated to God and truth, and that by its commitment to educate spiritually, pray with devotion, and gather in family groups, amplify the powerful light of the Christ presence to the collective, all leading to true abundance. We are Unity Community of Light, a bilingual unity ministry that offers an online programming in addition to workshops, retreats, and services in person internationally. Our commitment to the transformation of the collective consciousness is our priority. We are here by divine appointment to fulfill this sacred mission, one that we know can only be accomplished through our own transformation. Revana Quintana and Osvaldo Mora and other leaders are fully present to offer you the powerful unity teachings that will change your life forever. We welcome you from the bottom of our hearts.
Good morning. This is Tammy Johns, and I'm delighted to be here with you on this leg of the journey. And today we're going to be talking about the silence. And welcome to Unity Community of Light, Escuencho Espiritual English. And so today we have Josette with us. If you'd missed it, please go back and look at prayer. We talked about prayer with Josette, who is a prayer chaplain. And Josette, can you just kind of go back and give us a little take on your spiritual journey and tell us a little bit about yourself again?
I'd be happy to. Thank you for having me on, Reverend Johns. I just appreciate it. Reverend Tammy, I think that has such an amazing, I don't know, ring to it. It makes me smile when I say it. I was raised Catholic, but I fought it almost the entire time I was in the Catholic Church. My grandparents, who I lived with along with my mom and my siblings, my grandfather was a Methodist minister, and my grandmother's father had also been a minister. So there was a lot of conversations about God around our dinner table. And most of the sermons that I heard preached by my grandfather were a lot of, hellfire, brimstone, you're going to hell, you're bad. Then I go to Catholic school and the nuns are saying you're bad, you got to be careful. And I felt like God had like this big tablet. And every time I did something that was off the mark, check, check, check. We had to go to confession, once a month on Friday. And I thought there's got to be a different way to do this. So I probably started my spiritual journey when I was in second or third grade. And for probably until I was in my 50s, I was still trying to build that relationship with God that felt authentic to me. And it nurtured and nourished me as opposed to making me frightened, because God before then made me frightened. So this journey, knowing that, and I always had a sense that there was a God, but it was not what was introduced to me, because as a kid, I'd be by myself and, I would have all these wonderful thoughts, and I could feel the spirit if I was just watching trees or the clouds. I just feel this wonderful sense of peace. And I didn't realize that that was God, because what they were telling me in church and in school was that God he's got a list. He's checking it twice, kind of like Santa Claus, naughty,
Like
nice.
Exactly.
And I had a lot of naughties, okay, because I was not the perfect child. I had a lot of things that I was not according to, the good book. So, but when I was just by myself and I would be happy, I'd hear some beautiful music and I'd say, oh, that makes me feel so good. That was God. But I wasn't allowed to believe that because it was not consistent with what I was being taught in church or at school. So I set it on my own.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that part of your spiritual journey because I'm sure a lot of people can relate. They have to find their God, whatever that looks like for them, and in some religions or in some cases, it can be God is this, checking that tablet and
Yep.
like, okay, when I get to the pearly gates, am I going to be able to get in because I have all these check boxes or whatever?
Oh,
So finding God is you.
I
Go
have to
ahead.
say this because you reminded me of something that happened. I had two children, and I did one of those kind of like bargaining prayers. Okay, God, because I've been told you might not be able to have children, and so I said, okay. So I had my little prayer. Okay, God, if you just let me have some children,
Yeah.
honestly, I promise you, I will raise them right. I will raise them to love you and to serve you.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I have two sons. And they will tell you from time to time when they would get unruly, and I'd say, no, you're going to church, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that. They said, we don't want to go. I said, look, you're not going to, I have to answer to God. When I get to heaven, I have to answer to God about what did I do with you because he gave you to me. You're not going to keep me out of heaven. You're going to go to church. And I just had that thought of how I bargained to get the kids. And I would say, I promise God, I promise God that I would raise you to know him.
Right.
And I think I just thought about that, and they would look at me, oh Lord, and they would say, "Oh, that's right. She promised God, so gosh, that means we can't do anything." I'm like, well, whatever,
Right.
but you're not keeping me out of heaven.
Right. Exactly. Right. I know a lot of
Oh
people
God,
think that
I
way.
can't believe
Yes.
I did that. I can't believe I did
Yeah,
that.
right. A lot of people have those bargaining prayers. Like I said, last week we talked about prayer, and today we're going to talk about silence
Mhm.
because prayer is a way of talking to God, and silence is a way of just listening for that still small voice of God. Now, there are religious examples of being in the silence. And that is, for example, Jesus was on the mountaintop for 40 days. There was Siddhartha Gautama, who meditated under a Bodhi tree for 49 days until he became enlightened and known as the Buddha. There's the Prophet Muhammad, who meditated and prayed in a cave until he heard from Allah through the angel Gabriel. Now, we might say we're not going to be on a mountaintop, we're not going to be in a cave, we're not going to be in the desert wandering around, but there are times where we can actually have silence with God and listen to what God is trying to tell us. Because then it is that state of pure being when we're silenced. It is when we have that individual consciousness
Mhm.
and that God consciousness, they merge. And we begin to surrender and appreciate all of the things that God is trying to do and guide us along the way. And it is the silence where we go deep into the depths of our soul on our spiritual journey, on this quest that we're on, where God will be able to guide us and lead us down the path that we are going to go. What do you think about that, about the silence, Josette?
I think it's so important for a lot of reasons. You can't hear if your mind is not quiet and still.
Mm-hmm.
You because God's voice, it can be very loud sometimes to get your attention. Sometimes God has to really shake you up. But if you really want to know what God is saying to you through your heart center, you have to be still.
Yes.
And I have two granddaughters, and one of them is in a constant state of emotion, constant state of emotion. So I was with her last week, and I taught her how to be still. And she was upset about something. I said, Ella, let's just be still for a minute. And she goes, what does that mean? I said, okay, just sit still, sit next to me and do what I do. I put my hand on my
Mm-hmm.
heart, and I just breathed in and out for a few minutes. And then I said, think about something that you like, something pretty, something that makes you happy. And just focus on that. Don't say anything. Don't tell me what it is. Just think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually she was able to settle herself. And part of getting close to God and being able to manifest his will, or I don't say his will, the will,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be still. And I have this book, and I keep this book. I got this book many, many years ago. It's called Stillness Speaks by
Okay.
Eckhart Tolle. And he also wrote a book called The Power of Now. I read The Power of Now first, and then I saw Stillness Speaks and picked it up. And it teaches you that silence takes your mind off of the external world and directs your mind towards your inner world. And it allows you to be aware of things that you can't see when you're not silent. And it's hard. It was harder for me to practice than I thought because everything that I do is in the external world. I'm an attorney, so I talked a lot because that's what we do. That's what we get paid to do. And so when I got sick several years ago, I had plenty of time to be by myself. I was in a hospital bed or I was in my room, and I found that I had time to just be still. Nobody was asking me to do anything. And
Mhm.
when you usually think about being sick, you have all kinds of thoughts about it, but you probably don't think of it as a meditative time. But I did. I found it to be very meditative. And when you
Mhm.
talked about going out, that Jesus going to the Mount of Olives, the year that I had that I was ill, our pastor at our church did not preach. He had different people from the congregation give a lesson on Sunday, and he asked me to give mine, and gave mine on my Lenten experience with cancer and how I used Lent to still myself and to be quiet to assist my physical healing as well as my emotional and spiritual healing. So
Mm.
I'd get up in the morning with the kids, say goodbye, and then I would just sit and just be still. I had nothing to do. It's the weirdest thing. I had nothing to do, nowhere to go. I wasn't
Right.
working. So
Mhm.
I thought, well, what am I supposed to do? And I found that I could talk to God and I could listen back.
Right. And that's great in listening because when you think about your day, a person like you just described your day, and I'll describe mine in a second what my morning routine is. But think about your day. A lot of people they get up to an alarm clock and they jump out of bed, they have their daily routine, they get going, whether it is grabbing your phone and checking your email and your
Yep.
social media or surfing the internet. Maybe you're turning on the news and getting all of that mundane noise and chaos around you, or if you're headed to work or school or wherever you're going, you're getting in the traffic, you're chatting, 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 always doing something. And then you get home, you're tired, you have dinner, you're like, okay, well, I might say a quick prayer, but we don't really have time to spend time because we
Hmm.
have all this noise and chaos going around in our heads. And so, for example, I thought about a friend of mine she's a talker. And there's no problem, no judgment there because we all talk, right? But she's always chatting and giving details about everything. And when I'm in conversation with her, sometimes I have a problem getting a word in. And that's probably what God looks at some of us sometimes and says, I would just love to get a word in with you, my child. Just like be silent and listen. And that is time where we can really do that, where there's no separation between us and God. It is that quiet time where it's like God wants to lead us to the green pastures and the still waters,
Hmm.
and restore our soul and our mind, because that also has physical benefits when we're in silence. A lot of people think when they first think of silence, they think of meditating, and they think, oh my God, there's this mysterious thing that I have to do where that I have to sit like in this yoga position like a
Hmm.
monk
Right.
and be
Right.
still for hours and long periods of time. Well, it is really just sitting in the quiet with God. It can be meditating or chanting or doing whatever it is you want to do, but it can also just be that time where you are communing with God, right?
Absolutely. I'm married to a very quiet person, and
Ah.
uh, so I've taken a lot of my cues from him because he has a routine where he gets up in the morning and he does spiritual readings and things like that. My
Mm-hmm.
routine is I read the daily word and I reflect upon how I might order my day in alignment with what was in the prayer that day, and it's almost always something that is going to fit in. And then I walk my dog, and my dog can't talk. And so we walk around the neighborhood. I stop in the park. We don't talk to people. I mean, if I see people, oh, good morning, but I focus my morning time, my morning walk with her in the stillness with her.
Mm.
What is she smelling? And if she sniffs at something I like, oh God, that's beautiful. Thank you. Or it could be a flower. Oh man, that's a beautiful flower. thank you. My morning time is really my gratitude. Like this is wonderful. It is harder for me to do that because I don't like silence. It's probably something from my childhood where I
Mm-hmm.
thought if it was quiet, something must be wrong. So is mommy okay? Because my mother was a divorced woman, and she often went through these periods of what I projected as a child, not understanding was something was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't understand what kids see. We see things differently. She's not talking. There must be something wrong. So I would try to fill the silence so that maybe if she were sad about something, she would come out of it. In reality, she's a single mom raising three kids that she wants to put into private school. So yeah, I'm sure now when I think back on it, she had plenty of reason to be like, "Oh my goodness, what's happening?" But I always
Right.
wanted to make her feel happy. I wanted people around me to be more joyful, and I do have a more joyful spirit. But
Mm-hmm.
as I got older and my kids started separating from me and to pursue their own things, I found that I really enjoyed the stillness. And I have two sons. One is very loud and rowdy, or was as a child, and the
Mm-hmm.
other one was really quiet. And I loved them both because they brought me different things. But if I needed quiet and stillness, I would always hope that my older son was home when I got home from work and that my youngest son was not.
Okay.
Because my older son and I could be in the same house all day and not even know we're there
Mm-hmm.
because there's no music, there's just silence. And that's how I learned to be silent because he was such a quiet child and the other one was not. And now the other one is moving towards that stillness that and I always pray that as he is still, he will hear the voice of God.
Right. Because a lot of times we don't want to be silent. I love your point. People are always trying to fill the space with something and being busy because we don't want to hear. We don't want to hear what
That's it.
maybe God is going to tell us, or we don't want to be with our emotions or our feelings and our thoughts.
Right.
So we just run from the silence. I know for me, I have a standard morning, like yourself. I have a standard morning routine. I get up and let my dog out, feed him so he gets his needs met so he doesn't disturb me. He goes back to bed and I just say, okay, I have a sunroom.
Hmm.
If it's nice, I'll sit in the sunroom, but if it's nice, I'll sit outside and I'm just with nature. We can find silence in so many things, whether it's the hum of traffic, it might be children playing, it might be dogs barking, birds chirping, or I even watch the little gecko that seems to have found a home in my
Oh, that's
gazebo,
nice.
which I don't really care for, but I'm like, okay. But you can find messages and everything, squirrels running around and birds, like I said, birds chirping. And then sometimes I just sit and I close my eyes, I take in a deep breath, and I just say, God, speak to me in the stillness of the voice. And we don't have to be intimidated by meditating. If you're good at meditating, some people say I'm not good at meditating. You can even just take a few deep breaths, be in the silence and say something like, I am, and just invite the God consciousness in within you. And that's what I do in my daily routine. And I get lots of messages. I'll give an example of,
Hmm.
like, for example, when I didn't live where I live now, I just had a lazy boy chair in my room. And I would just sit and I would just say, okay, what are you trying to tell me, God? And I would just listen. And there was a time where I was looking for a career change.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, and I got a job offer. It was offering a significant amount of pay increase. It was going to be relocating to a place where I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And I would be doing what I thought I wanted to do. And there was something that wasn't quite right about it. So I sat in the silence. And as I was sitting, I got this image of this shiny red ball. And I just smiled because I'm like, yeah, I know what the red ball means. I'm a go-getter. I'm a glass ceiling breaker. A friend of mine at one point called me. She said, you're a mover, shaker, and a paradigm breaker. And
Mm,
I'm just like,
okay.
I'm going. Yeah, exactly. I said, I love to go after things. And if something would catch my attention, I'm like, okay, yeah, let's go and do that. But I was holding the ball. I wasn't chasing the ball in my quiet
Mm,
time. And it was my time to just sit and be still and stay in my current situation. And what I found from that is instead of making a career transition, I moved more in focusing on my ministry. I became
Mm-hmm.
more involved in my church. And I had been running from the ministry for so long, and it wasn't time to run after that shiny red ball. It was time to just sit and be still. Those are the kinds of messages that we can get when we're still.
Right. I think it's so important to pay attention to those voices. And unfortunately, our society really doesn't cultivate that approach. And I remember a similar time in my career, it's the last job I had, I'd reached the 5 year mark and I was ready to leave. I knew in my spirit,
Hmm.
I knew it is time to leave. What you've accomplished, what you said you were going to do,
Hmm.
the next level of this. And I knew I was going to be a transition person from the person before me had been there for a very long time. And my role, as I viewed it, was to be the transition person. I was not planning to stay there for 20 years. And I felt myself being drugged out. I mean, I started getting sick. I started having, uh, uh, just not feeling good. And having been ill, I was like, I don't want to be sick again. So I was really paying attention. And one day I woke up and the voice was so clear. It's time to go. So
Hmm.
I was sharing this with a friend of mine, and it was actually my husband. We weren't married at the time, and I said, "I'm ready to go." He goes, "Oh no, you can handle this a little bit longer. You're strong. You can do this. You can do that." I said, "No, I'm ready to go. This is going to get harder for me because I don't feel it. I don't have that that passion that I need to do the job I want to do and to go through the hurdles that are going to be ahead of me because I know I can feel them coming when I let him talk me into it."
Ah.
That started 2 years of being sick. I developed allergies. I was at urgent care trying to figure out why I couldn't breathe. I was having chest x-rays and all of this kind of stuff. And ultimately, I was fired. They gave me, we're gonna, we're redesigning your job. We're restructuring your job. You're out. We've got another person coming in.
Hmm.
That was a blow to me because I had done everything that I knew to do. But what it taught me, Tammy, is that when that voice speaks, I listen. And I told him, I said,
Hmm.
I think you're a very smart person. I trust your judgment about things that you do, but I will never let you talk me into staying someplace where I know my time is up.
Right. We
My time
listen
is
to
up.
other voices. Exactly. We listen to other voices instead of that still small voice. And for me, I'm like, okay, I've got this, God. I hear you, but I'm going to go ahead and do this. And then we get that nudge on the shoulder. It's like, yeah, no, no, no. I feel that nudge, but I'm going to do something else. And because I'm a doer and I'm going to go ahead
Hmm.
and do that.
I'm
But
a,
then God
I'm a,
sometimes has to take a 2x4 and say, boom. So it can be that still small voice. It can be the nudge. It can be the 2x4. But we don't, a lot of times we make it harder on ourselves
we really
instead of
do.
just listening to that still small voice.
That is so true. And what I've learned about life is that when God is trying to commune with you and talk to you, he comes first in a still voice.
Right.
And if you don't listen, it comes again and it might be a little louder. Then it
Mm-hmm.
comes again and it might be some circumstance that you don't like. And then it comes again and it comes again. And when I got ill
Mm-hmm.
in 18 months, divorce, chronic illness, and then acute illness with surgery and all of that, I heard him say, I always say him because that's just how I was raised, but I hate it.
Okay.
I told you,
Mm.
slow down, be still, be quiet, take care of yourself. I heard it. And I go and I visit the parish priest because I tell him that I want, prayer and all of that. And I tell him, the surgery schedule and all that. And he said, "Well, I have some advice for you." I'm like, "Oh, okay, what is it?" And
More
he says,
advice, right?
"Yeah, more advice. I'm hearing from God, now I'm hearing from you. And I guess you're speaking on his behalf." But he says to me, "There are going to be a lot of people that are going to want to do things for you. Are there things that you need that I can make people aware of. I say, oh no, I've got this. I've got my plans all in place. I've got my family together. I've got my sister and I got all that worked out. He said, you're not listening. I said, okay, well, say it again. He goes, there are going to be people who want to do things for you because this church is that kind of church. And I see you and your friends out doing things when there's a funeral, wedding, or whatever. You guys are there kind of taking care of people. People are going to want to do that for you. I said, well, I don't need that. He goes, oh, so you don't need the gifts of the Spirit.
Mm,
So
mm,
I don't understand. He goes, when people want to do something for you, it's because they're listening to God.
right.
And the Spirit is calling them to do something. And you
Mm,
think that you can just reject a gift of the Spirit. And after that, I was like, oh, wow. Because I've always done everything for myself and for everybody else. I didn't let anybody do anything for me. I got this. Boy, he broke
right.
that habit. He broke that habit. People were coming in. I got to the point once I was through being sick, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to cook. No, I'm going to call so-and-so because she's going to make me some bread or someone's going to make me some
Right.
chicken,
Right.
because I had never really allowed myself to receive.
Yes. And receiving is so important. And it's because other people are following their will for God's will, and
Well,
God telling them what to do.
right,
And
right.
it's only when we find those things out is when we sit in the silence. And that is so important. And this has been another great conversation, Josette.
It's just
I
been
really
wonderful.
appreciate. I know it is. It's
It's
great
really
because,
great.
whether it's prayer that we talked about last week and it's the silence, I would encourage you on this journey to just sit in the silence, whether it's meditating or just sitting in nature or finding a spot, a quiet place in your home where you can't be disturbed, where you are raising your higher consciousness and
Hmm.
connecting with the divine consciousness. I would encourage you to do that. And another thing is journal. Journal after, or write down any insights that you have, because you may forget it. So journal. So I just want to thank you all for joining us on this journey. And if you have found anything that resonates with you today, I would ask that you would donate and go to unitycoml.org and donate. And let us close with a prayer. You bow your heads or lower your gaze. Thank you, dear God. I still my body. I still my mind. I relax completely. I surrender my spirit, my soul, and my body to you, dear God. Fill me with your presence as I sit and listen in the silence. Let this be the prayer and something more. And so it is. Amen, Amen, and Ashe. Thank you for joining us, and thank you so much, Josette.
Thank you
See
so
you next
much,
week.
Tammy. Thank
Mhm.
you.